What if I told you that the blog that changed how so many travelers earn and redeem points over the last decade started because one guy wanted elite status and realized he wasn't going to fly enough to keep it? Well, that guy is Greg Davis Keene, better known as Greg the Frequent Miler, a legend in the points and miles world whose curiosity, tech-driven mind, and obsession with optimization turned a small personal blog into one of the most trusted brands in travel rewards. Today, Greg and I dive into how it all began, from his first life-changing redemption to building Frequent Miler into a powerhouse of transparency and trust. We'll talk about his most unforgettable redemptions, including one that had him rubbing elbows with Richard Branson himself, and the mindset that keeps him at the top of the game more than a decade later. Regardless if you're brand new to the points and miles world, or if you've already got a drawer full of premium cards, this conversation is one you're going to remember. Welcome to the Revolutionizing Your Journey podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Coke. I have a fantastic guest that I am super excited for you all to hear. But before we introduce him, I want to provide a reminder that we record or show all these videos on YouTube. And for those of you that watch our videos on YouTube, don't forget every Friday we have our quick hits. That is our audio only, up-to-date kind of points and miles news that we try to break with multiple segments in a short amount of time. Now, without further ado, I've got Greg Davis Keene, aka Greg the Frequent Miler, on the show today, and I am super excited for him to be here for multiple reasons. One, Greg is a legend in the points and miles space, and we're going to unpack a lot of that today. But also, he is part of the Voyescape Travel Podcast Network with us here with the Revolutionizing Your Journey podcast. And I believe last I checked, we're the only two Points and Miles podcasts in that network. So I am super excited. I feel like I'm in great company here. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, DeAndre. It's great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. You know, Greg, I'm super excited, not to deep dive too much into a specific Points and Miles topic. And I know you're the best of the best where we could dive into pretty much anything, but I really wanted to do this episode more of an interview with you on a personal level and learn, where did Frequent Miler come from? Because it's really a powerhouse in the points and miles community, and a respected powerhouse, I should say, but also learn your mindset around points, how that's shaped your personal travel life, and also understand how you are able to educate the points and miles community from your lens. And I'm really excited to get into that today.
All right, great. I'm happy to do that too.
Perfect. Well, Greg, let's just start. Can you tell us about, maybe let's go back a ways to your earlier days of travel. How did you get started in travel? And I know you had a little bit of a tech background as well, but how'd that lead into points and miles?
Yeah, great question. I've always enjoyed travel. I wasn't a huge traveler as a young adult, though. My wife and I would travel sort of regionally, regularly, usually driving, very occasionally flying. And we always talked about doing big trips. We wanted to go to Hawaii. We wanted to go to Australia. We wanted to do things like that. But we were both working, and we always thought to do any of that stuff, you need like 2 or 3 weeks of time to really make it worth it. And so that kind of prevented us from doing lots of stuff over time. Finally, one day, my wife ran across this ridiculously good sale for flights to Australia. And we were like, we should just do this. We looked at our calendars, and it was like our typical lives where we could only find 1 week where we were both available to go to Australia. And we just said, what the heck? This is so inexpensive. We might as well just do it. So we just flew to Sydney. We didn't go anywhere else around Australia. We just did like Sydney and the region that around there. And we had an awesome time. I mean, yeah, it's true. After the flight time is considered, we only really had 6 days. But at the same time, we loved it. We got back and said, this was great. Let's, next time we have a week free, we've been wanting to go to Hawaii. And what's been stopping us is like, we want to visit every island. Let's just go to one island. And so over the next few years, we did one island every time we had a chance to fly. So, and then that, of course, broadened into other travel as well. So now we'll fast forward a bit. I was working at Thomson Reuters in software development, and I would travel occasionally for work to visit different offices and things. And one day I was checking into the hotel with another guy from work, and the guy who's at like the check-in desk next to me, this a friend from work, they hand him like a bunch of like gifts. They're like, we've upgraded your room and here's a bunch of swag and stuff. And I just did this double take. And then as we're walking away from the desk, I'm like, what was with that? I don't get that. Why did they give you all that stuff? And that's when he told me about elite status. I didn't know anything about hotel elite status before that. I knew a little bit about like airline elite status because by then I had been traveling enough. I probably had actually the Australia trip I mentioned got my entire family enough for Delta. I guess it was Northwest at the time, silver status. And so even our 9-year-old son had elite status at that time, which was pretty cool. But that kind of, I don't know. Honestly, it made me kind of jealous. I'm like, hey, I want to get what that guy's getting, right? And same kind of thing on flights when you see people, especially when it's people getting upgraded and you're not. You're like, oh, I want that. So I started to travel more as I rose up the ranks at Thomson Reuters and had Delta Gold status, and I enjoyed getting upgrades when they happened. And then one day in 2011, Thomson Reuters issued a no travel decree. They're like, don't travel anymore unless you're going to meet customers. And I was always traveling to go to other offices to talk with software development people. So that meant no work travel for me. So I was like, uh-oh, how am I going to keep my Delta Gold status? I don't see this happening. Because by then, like, my wife and I, we were traveling quite a bit personally, but that might have been enough to maintain silver, but no way near gold. So that's when I started Googling for things like how to earn status without flying or whatever. And I found Flyer Talk, something called MilePoint at the time. It doesn't exist as that anymore, but it was similar to Flyer Talk, and blogs, in the points and miles space. And it was just perfect for me. It resonated with me so well. I just fell for it so hard because I realized, for one thing, if you earn a lot of points and miles, you don't really need elite status to get treated great, right? You could just use those points and miles to book first class flights and luxury hotels from the get-go and not worry about it. At the same time, there's all these tricks for shortcuts to elite status, getting elite status through spend or through other means. And yeah, I was fascinated by that too. So all those things made me like just super excited about this hobby in a way I'd never been before.
So when that happened, what was the point where you kind of went, all right, this is serious enough. This points world is serious enough for me to want to start writing about it. And starting Frequent Miler, I don't know if that was the original name or it changed or evolved over time.
It was.
Okay, perfect. And so you started Frequent Miler. How was that procession of, okay, this is serious enough for me to start writing about it? And then did you think and or hope that blog writing in this world would end up being your career by chance?
Definitely not to that second part. So very early on, as soon as I got into this, I started signing up for credit cards to get all the points and miles. And I booked, like right away, I booked a trip for my family and I to go to London. We flew business class. We stayed in the like Intercontinental Hotel. And it was like our first proof that, wow, all this stuff I've been reading about, like, I mean, I knew it was true, intellectually, but this was like, this is really true. This really works. And it was just unbelievable. So I wanted to tell all my family and friends about it, but I knew that the only way I had at the time, social media, it wasn't as far along as it is today to where like, you could get to most of your friends and relatives through certain platforms. It wasn't like that back then. So the only way I could reach out to everybody directly would be email. And the problem with that is, like, I knew right from the get-go, there's going to be a lot of questions. And then I would have to like answer questions separately to each person I had reached out to. And that didn't sound like fun at all. So I thought, okay, I'll just make a blog and write like the stuff I'm excited about. And then I could email my friends and relatives like links to it and then go from there. I didn't at the time know that it was even possible to earn any serious money from a blog. I mean, yes, advertising existed, but I had thought that maybe I could earn $1 in a year, that like that kind of thing.
Right. Yep.
It really seriously never occurred to me at that time that it could be a business. One way I wasn't very serious is when I came up with the name Frequent Miler, I did check Flyer Talk to make sure that handle was available. And I checked Twitter. I think that's it. And the handle was available on both of those. It never occurred to me to check whether frequentmiler.com was available because I didn't have any plans at that time to create my own domain. It wasn't available at that time, by the way. So when I did create my own domain, I had frequentmiler.net and thefrequentmiler.com. I didn't like either of those, but that's what I had for many years.
That's super, super interesting. Do you know at the time, I don't know if it was a defunct or just dead site, but what frequentmiler.com was before, you guys were able to co-acquire it by chance?
I don't remember exactly, but the first few weeks, it was probably like, I don't know, WordPress.frequentmiler.com or something like that. Or sorry, frequentmiler.wordpress.com, something along those lines. I just used whatever the easiest thing was. And I don't even remember because a few weeks after I started, Boarding Area reached out to me. So Boarding Area is a hosting platform for Points and Miles blogs. And one of the things I was excited about doing when I started as a hobbyist in this hobby was earning Delta Elite status through credit card spend. And I had come across through a blog called Frugal Travel Guy back then that making Kiva loans was a good way to generate credit card spend and eventually get your money back. So I was doing a lot of that and I was kind of active on some forums that were around doing that. And Randy Peterson, who runs Boarding Area, the blog, when he saw me posting about the Kiva stuff and writing posts on my blog about it, he had his main guy reach out to me and say, do you want to join Boarding Area? And I couldn't believe it because to me, Boarding Area was where all the big guys were. That's where Lucky from 1 Mile at a Time and Gary from View from the Wing and, a lot of the blogs that I was really excited about and reading every single day were already on there. And so to be invited to be part of that community was just crazy. So I was so excited about that. So I said yes right away, of course. And so then for many years, my main URL was, I think it was frequentmiler.boardingarea.com. And that's what it was until I bought frequentmiler.com's domain, which happened during the pandemic. I was finally able to convince the company that owned it, and they weren't doing anything with it, but I was finally able to convince them to sell it to me.
Very cool. There's two things that you mentioned that I want to step back to just briefly. So the first is that you had mentioned essentially when you had that first redemption at the Intercontinental, right, that opened your eyes to wow, this is real. You've been hearing about it, or maybe at the time more so reading about it, you knew it was real, but once you actually did it, it became real. And I love that experience because that's what it is for so much of us in this world. And I talk about it on the show quite often, especially for the newer individuals out there that are just getting into this world. You can read all the time, you can listen to all the podcasts and all the experts, but it really becomes real when you actually do your first redemption. And I think that's also the moment where most people can get their player 2 on board when they're like, okay, how did we do this again?
Exactly.
So I love how that was also your experience because it shows that really we all have a very similar set of how we got into Points and Miles. And also it's the same experience of, I want to live the same lifestyle traveling that this guy is. What is he doing different that I can't do? Right. And so,
right.
So I love that you mentioned that. And the second piece, which we're not going to go into because we just don't have the time to, but you talk about Kiva. I think that's something that's super unique. We've actually never talked about it on the show, but I know you guys on Frequent Miler have talked about it quite often. I've heard it on a number of your coffee breaks and different episodes. So all I will say is for the listeners out there, there's a really unique way that you can essentially loan out funds. And Greg, you can explain it way better than me. But the long and short of it is you should go to the frequent miler to read and learn how to do it and how it makes sense. But it's a very interesting strategy. Is that a kind of a good way to just summarize it, basically?
Sure. It's a platform for making micro loans to people who need funds, and you don't get paid back with interest, but you do usually get paid back, and you can fund them with a credit card. That's the key thing to know here, and it does count as a purchase every single time. Go to frequentmiler.com/Kiva, Kiva, to learn all about it.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well. So, Greg, moving on a little bit, were there any kind of big milestones for you where you moved from Greg the frequent miler, hobbyist, writer, blogger, to this is now a full-time business for me? I am stepping away from my career into my previous career into doing this.
Yeah. So let me kind of paint the picture here of what led up to that before I go into detail about that event. So I already mentioned that, I didn't think of this as a business. This was just a hobby to communicate my interest with other people. But Boarding Area, or Randy Peterson, invited the Boarding Area bloggers to go to, I think it was called Blog World, something like that, in New York City. So this was just maybe 2 months, maybe less than that, after I started blogging on Boarding Area. So I went and I met some of the bloggers I had been reading. I think that's when I met the person who wrote Mommy Points. Now she writes for The Points Guy. And I met Jen from Deals We Like and a number of other blogs that I used to read regularly. So that was very exciting. But it was like the first time I kind of saw the business side of blogs, going to that Blog World thing. I wasn't really interested in all these talks about how to monetize your blog, but it put that idea in my head that there's something possible there. And as a complete aside, there were a number of sessions about how you really should be looking into podcasting as your thing. And at the time I was like, there's no way. This points and mile stuff is way too complicated to talk about on a podcast. No one would listen to that. So anyway, I find that kind of funny, that looking back at that time. So the other thing that's important about that event is I met Jen, who wrote Deals We Like, and she is the one who told me about credit card affiliate links. And that's where if I post a link to a credit card offer on my site, if I have an affiliate relationship with the bank, and a person clicks through and is approved for that card, then I get paid a commission as if I'm a salesperson. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't have any interest in being like a salesperson. I didn't want to go out and push credit cards on people. But I thought if people are signing up anyway and they want to do me a favor and click on my links, cool. So I signed up. At that time, it was really easy for bloggers to get approved, especially if they were on Boarding Area. That's not the case anymore. And so I signed up for the affiliate networks. I put some links on my blog. At some point, I decided, I already mentioned this, that I didn't want to push people, push cards at people like I'm a salesperson. So I put all my links on a separate page. I never even linked to those links from my blog post. I just put them on a separate page and told some people, if you want to sign up through my links, that'd be great, but they're over there. You can find them over there. Not smart from a business point of view, but it's how I did it to keep a separation between income and what I was writing. Okay, so then fast forward so I had started the blog in September of 2011. Now fast forward to, I don't know, I think it was March of 2012 when there was the 967th reorganization at Thomson Reuters. And this particular one meant that my entire area was gone. So I had to either apply for a new job somewhere in Thomson Reuters, or my boss said I could get a severance package. And the severance package option was very nice. I had been at Thomson Reuters for 16 years. I was getting 2 weeks of pay for every year. So it was very close to 8 months of severance. So it didn't take me but a second to be like, that's what I'm doing. And I went back home to my wife and son, was like, I'm going to try being a blogger full time. And I was not making any money at this point. Maybe if a couple $100s had come in at that point. So it sounded completely bonkers, but my website the traffic to it was accelerating very quickly. So I wasn't a big site by any means, but my audience was clearly growing quickly. So I thought I could make it happen. And I basically told my wife, if this isn't working after 8 months, then fine, I'll look for a job. But, there's no risk because I'm getting paid for that long.
Very cool. So obviously it ended up working out in that 8-month-ish timeline and beyond. So you've grown, now it's not just you, there's a full team that you've built over the years. It's you and Nick on the podcast. I mean, you guys are well over 400 episodes into this thing. I mean, so you guys have a lot of content that you've put out there, the blog. How do you keep the content, I'd say fresh, but more importantly, trustworthy? Because I was actually talking with someone today about this that I didn't realize until I really, really, really got into the weeds, especially from even just a content standpoint with Points and Miles, how similar, or the similarities, I should say, between the financial planning world that I'm in as a financial advisor and the Points and Miles world, and more specifically how regulations and rules and everything change by the day. B, there are people here that are not looking out for your best interest because they're only trying to push content. And C, that trust is a huge factor into really gaining authority in this space. And side note, my firm's name that I own is Truicity Wealth Management, and Truicity just stands for trust and authenticity put together. So trust is huge. Greg, how have you been able to keep grounded in that trust part of the content you put out and the information you put out?
Sure. Yeah, that's super important to me that we remain, trustworthy. And from very early on, I mentioned about credit card affiliate links. And this is the biggest place where, especially blogs in this space, can be called into question about whether they're trustworthy. Let me put it that way. Because what you have are people recommending credit cards, not because it's the best thing for the audience, but because they pay out the biggest margins for the blogger themselves. And that kind of sucks because, just like podcasts with blogs, people feel like they have a relationship with the producer of the content. And over time, they feel like they can trust them usually. And so you have someone as a reader you think you can trust telling you to sign up for this card. You're probably just going to be like, oh, they say it's really good. It must be really good. I'm going to do it. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So I was in a really fortunate position where, when I was starting this on my own, not only did I have the severance thing to lean on, but my wife had a great job, still does. And I had earned many years of retirement savings. And so had she. So I didn't have anything to prove, financially, really. So very early on, I made the decision with these credit card offers. I mentioned putting them on another page so that they're kind of out of sight, so that I'm not kind of hawking them in blog posts. But the other thing I did is I decided if I'm going to show a credit card offer at all, I'm only going to show the best public offer, regardless of whether I have an affiliate link for it or not. And over time, that's proven even more important than it was back then. And by that, I mean, more and more often, we've seen credit card companies come out with amazing offers that are not available through the affiliate channels. And so I remember one time I was doing a presentation in New York City at a travel show. I said, look, go to Frequent Miler and look at the Platinum card. You see a 150,000 point offer. Go to any other site, you'll see the 100,000 point offer. And, it was really obvious. The other sites were not doing what was in the best interest for the consumer. And so I think that built a lot of loyalty and trust with the Frequent Miler brand. Some other things I instituted was like on pages where we show a lot of credit cards, I don't sort them manually based on how I want you to sign up. Like a lot of people will be like, let's put the highest commission ones on top. I have a automated sorting. That is, we have estimates for how much value are you likely to get in the first year from this card. And we'll sort the ones that give you the most value at the top, regardless. And oftentimes the ones at the top are not ones that pay us. But I think that evens out in the end, that people keep coming back to us, recommending us to friends and family because they know they're going to find the best offer at Frequent Miler than anywhere else. So when I started hiring people, so Nick Reyes was my first full-time hire in 2017. So 5 years after I went full-time, so I made a point of like, pay is not tied at all to affiliate revenue. And in fact, he doesn't have access to the affiliate commissions like information. So he doesn't know like how much we're getting from different credit cards or things like that. I don't want him to know. I want him to write about a credit card because it's interesting, right? Or because it's exciting opportunity.
Absolutely.
Not because we'd get paid. And the great thing, it's kind of unbelievable, is that we've been able to do really well with this model of really kind of ignoring. We have to do the nuts and bolts of what's required to do the revenue side of things, but it's not something that drives any decisions about the content we produce.
Absolutely love that. I mean, I think that's full on alignment of values with being trustworthy, being authentic, not just authentically yourselves, but being authentic to your readers and your listeners, which is huge, which I think that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to move on to next, which is more the philosophy and mindset around points and miles. And I wanted to start with balancing easy wins for beginners versus deep dives for advanced readers, right? Because it's the same thing with my show, with your show, especially with your show, right? You can come into an episode and it's deep, it's analytical, there's substance.
Yeah.
But the day one points and miles person is just like, oh my God, what is this? Right? So how do you balance the beginner level and the advanced level and make sure that they're both enjoying the world of points and miles, basically, and what you are putting out?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend we do that well. All I could say is that we've created some beginner content, both in the podcast and on the blog, to help get people started. But we're going to talk at the level that interests us and do our best to explain to people who aren't as familiar, like why we're excited about this thing. Why are we excited about Japan Airlines miles of all things, right? But I find this fascinating that there are a lot of people that listen to our podcast, read the blog, that don't understand the stuff but enjoy it anyway. And I find that kind of interesting. I think it's like this world that they don't fully grok, but they get enough obviously to understand that what's exciting about it and that we're doing amazing things, but they don't really get nuts and bolts. So it's probably more entertainment than education. And then of course you have the people who maybe have started that way as fans, but then, over time learned enough to where they're like, okay, I am understanding this stuff now and benefiting from it and doing more and more of the more in-depth stuff that can get you much more travel for your points or many more points for your dollar, whichever side of the coin you want to look at.
I love that. Actually, at the same event I was referring to earlier today, I was talking to someone else about the fact that, they were saying similar. They actually listened to the podcast and like, yeah, I'm brand new, but I liken it to when I read something about like a medical breakthrough. Like I'm fascinated about what's happening. I have no idea the scientific terms they use, but like I'm fascinated with the terminology and the results and what you can get out of it. And I think that's a perfect answer that you gave, where I think it attracts individuals and that attraction can expand into them wanting to go down the rabbit hole in the hobby. And next thing you know, they've got 20, 30 or 70 cards like, we're sitting on. So I see that as well. Great. So talking back about philosophy, how do you at this stage really evaluate a points or miles opportunity? What makes it a good deal for you? And I know there's a million different ways that you could probably answer that, but I think on more of the surface level, like just intuitively at this stage, what's a good deal for you? Is it getting into the analytics or is it more intuition?
Well, let me turn that back a second. Do you mean a good deal for me personally, where I'd be excited about signing up for that credit card or redeeming points for that thing, or something where I say, oh, this is a good deal, we need to talk about it on the podcast? I'm not sure which direction you're thinking.
Perfect ask on your end. I'm going to say first, let's just talk about good deal in general for the public, for the mass. And then I want to later hone in on what's a good deal for you at this stage.
Sure. I don't think I could give a single concrete answer on that. I think it's more about that over time. Because I do this day in and day out, I know what sort of normal deals are like. And so it's usually very obvious when a deal is noteworthy. And, this is something we need to report on. Sometimes it takes a little more digging. Like as we're talking now, there's this Wyndham deal for people who have Wyndham Diamond status already. They could get 50 points per dollar through the end of the year. And you really have to kind of step back and look at that and say, how is that good? And you have to run the numbers. And then you say, oh, well, actually, that is really good. But to get that, you need to start with diamond status before you register for the promotion. So there's levels and levels there.
That makes perfect sense. Now, when you kind of segue that on the personal side of things, right? Because frequent miler has the reasonable redemption value. There's a lot of data behind what you talk through and analytics. And we're both analytical in different ways. You with your background in tech and kind of how you see the numbers and see points. Me, my background's in finance, but I see the numbers, I see the cents per point and all the things. And sometimes it's, maximizing the most value, and the number has to be the biggest theoretical return, right? If this was like the market, right? When it comes to points. But at this stage for you, is it a systematic process, or is it more process driven versus just intuitive at this level that you're at?
For my personal travel and point accumulations and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot more, I don't know if intuitive is the right word, but I'm kind of looser with it. So to back up a minute, what our reasonable redemption values are, we come up with point value estimates for all the different airline miles, the hotel points, the transferable points programs. And we say, this one, the reasonable redemption value is 1.5. And what that means is we think it's reasonable to redeem these points for 1.5 cents per point or better. And it's a general guideline for people who don't otherwise know how to value points to be able to say, is this a good redemption or a bad redemption? And so, if you look at, wow, that $200 flight is going to cost me 20,000 points, that's only 1 cent per point value. And you compare to the reasonable redemption value, let's say 1.5, you can immediately say, oh, that's not a good redemption. I'm not going to do that. In my case, I have a sense of how much different points are worth to me, which ones. And so I don't look at our reasonable redemption values to decide. What I do is I say, all right, Amex points, I have so many American Express membership rewards points that if there's a certain redemption where I'm only going to get 1.5 cents per point value, which is slightly under the RRV, I'm probably okay with that. But city points, I can't seem to get enough of those. So I'm only going to want to redeem for something that's considerably more than the reasonable redemption value for those. So it kind of depends on where you're at with your point balances and your ability to earn more. Points that you're earning like crazy, you should be freer to use them and not hold out for the ideal redemption.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And if you've gotten any value so far, it would mean the world if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep creating great content. Also, if you're feeling stuck or want help with points and miles, whether it's picking your first card, planning a big redemption, or even having someone book it all for you, we've got you covered. There's a link in the show notes to schedule a free points and miles consultation. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, tell us your goals, and we'll take it from there. And don't forget, our newsletter and private Facebook group are great ways to stay on top of breaking news, updated card offers, and tips that don't always make it into the podcast. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. I know this is a commonly, I don't say discussed, but debated topic on cents per point. And, I took the Emirates flight, so I got 10 or 15 cents per point. And I'd always encourage the listeners, hey, try to get 2 cents per point of value, especially in your transferable currencies, right? Like the Chase and the Amex and et cetera, et cetera. But of course, it doesn't always work for everybody. For yourself, do you find yourself calculating what is the cent per point I am getting? So there, of course, you have your reasonable redemption value, but do you look and say, okay, this business class ticket is $5,000. I'm using X amount of points. So I know I'm getting a good amount of value. Do you still find yourself mathing it at this stage of the game? Where you're like, it's enough points. It's enough value. I don't have to know it's 4.95 cents per point. I just know it's good.
More the latter. I just know it's good. So I don't anymore. That Emirates flight, I don't look up, unless I'm going to write a post about it. I don't look up how much is the cash rate for it. It's more that what I love most about the points and miles stuff is the ability to do things like fly Emirates first class, things that I would never pay cash for. It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, unless it was like a mistake fare, so it was so cheap, but it doesn't matter, whether I'm middle class or rich or whatever. I can't see myself forking over the dollars for, that much bling. But when it's points and you're getting outsized value for those points, it feels good to do that, to do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. And I think it's important, and not everybody may realize this, but when you're choosing to fly like international first class instead of international coach, the difference in cash price is usually like mind-boggling, like 10 to 1, maybe worse. The difference in point price, usually more like 2 to 1. So that's where you could get like this amazing value for your points. And the whole debate is like, do you value that redemption at the full cash rate of first class, even though you would have never paid for that? Or do you value it at the rate you would have paid if you got something else? I'm in the camp saying it almost doesn't matter what you would have done, because what you're getting is that, let's just call it a $10,000 experience that people really are paying for. Other people, you're not. So you're getting that experience. So people can do it however they want, but that's how I personally feel about it.
Love that. I thought that was a great example, or great answer, I should say. And also, it's really cool kind of seeing your mindset, of course, having done this, writing about it so much, and seeing how that's transitioned the way that you've traveled, which bringing me to on the travel side, I know you've taken a lot of trips. You've written about places. You've had your different challenges you guys do every single year. You're racing around the world. You've experienced a lot of trips, and I'm sure created a lot of memories. I'm really curious for yourself, if you could take us through some of your most memorable trips that were enabled by points and miles, and really what made them stand out. And this could be by whatever definition you want to consider. So whether it was the ultimate, points and miles holy grail, or if it was just like, hey, this was a core memory with my family that I would have never created otherwise. So whatever kind of scale you want to use, I'd love to know, with all the trips and all the things you've talked about, what are some of your top most memorable experience that points and miles have delivered to you?
Okay, sure. I'll start with one with my extended family. My niece was graduating high school. We wanted to do something special for her. She asked about going on a trip to New York City. And we decided, why not use all these points we've been earning to book a Hyatt for like everybody in the extended family? Not a huge family, but we're talking about, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 8 rooms.
Wow.
And so now Hyatt prices were a lot less back then, but still, it was a lot. But I was able to book everybody for, I don't remember, 2 or 3 nights at a nice Hyatt. And that's the type of thing that, like, it's not that I'm not generous, but I wouldn't have thought about doing with cash,
Right.
If it was cash, I would have been like, I'll pay for my niece and myself, but not all these other people.
Absolutely.
So, that's really fun. If you're doing really well with earning lots and lots of points and miles, then being able to do something like that is awesome. The biggest, most memorable award redemption I ever had, there's no question what it was. It was back at the time, Richard Branson's Necker Island was available for 1.2 million Virgin Atlantic points for a week for 2 people, all inclusive. And so I did all kinds of tricks back then. It took me 7 months to earn the 1.2 million miles needed for that. I booked it and I didn't know what to expect. There wasn't a lot, written or, videos or whatever about it. But boy, it was so awesome. We flew into this little beef island, which is near Necker Island, and the Necker Island team picks us up and others on a speedboat, hands us champagne. And so we're drinking champagne as we're floating into the island. We step off the boat. Richard Branson comes out to greet us all. And it was just a dream for a week. So much fun. There's so many activities to do. Branson was very interesting. He'd be around as much as he could be for meals and other things. And there were maybe, I can't remember, maybe somewhere in the around 15 or 16 guests total and close to 100 staff. So, there was an incredible staff to guest ratio there. And what was so cool is because we're doing so many things together as a group, we got to know, some people really well. And these are people from different parts of the world. There were a lot of people from England there. There were fewer people from the US. So anyway, we made friends, in different parts around the world. And so there's a couple that live in London that we visit often. We've seen them many, many times over the years since going to Necker Island. There was a couple from Grand Cayman who we visited them a couple times since staying at Necker Island. And we follow a lot more people like on Facebook and other, Instagram and stuff. So, it's one of those that not only was an unbelievable experience, but it actually changed our lives because of these ongoing friendships.
So the audience, of course, they're not seeing this, especially most of them that listen. And on YouTube, we only show you talking. So when you're like Richard Branson, Necker Island, you started laughing because I just started shaking my head in just wowness, right? But you say no questions asked. I was thinking, okay, is it like the residence, Etihad, something like that? But that is I would say that's on like the holy grail level of a point redemption. That is quite spectacular. That is absolutely unreal. So you got me almost speechless here. So
I love that.
Let's pivot to the other end of the spectrum, because while it's awesome talking about awesome redemptions, I know not a lot of times, you guys are very transparent. We just talked about earlier in the show at Frequent Miler, where not just about credit cards and those type of things, but you also talk about the things that didn't go right when it comes to redeeming. And I think it's really easy for a listener, especially a newer listener, to hear about the fancy trips and the Dom in the sky and the Emirates and all the things that, there's also some nerves, right? Am I going to do something wrong? And even us pros have mistakes that get made and lessons that get learned. So I'm really curious if there are any recent mistakes or mishaps that you've made even this late in this world, in this game, that you think could encourage even the newer listener by chance?
Yeah. Let me first say that, I think that making mistakes is such a good way to learn that try not to feel bad when you make them. I've compared the miles and points game before to like taking home a new complicated board game where, you're just whipping out, reading the rules, and they're not making much sense to you. And the only way for most people to learn how to play that game is to just start doing it and make mistakes and then correct those mistakes. And that's even before like learning like strategies and getting better at it, right? So I think the points and miles thing is the same thing. You kind of just have to jump in, start doing it, start making mistakes. It's not going to be the end of the world if you make some mistakes early on. There'll be plenty of time to do it better. With that having said, so I'm trying to think, I make mistakes all the time, but I'm trying to think if there's any like good ones to talk about that are interesting. I almost made one just the other day. Well, it was a mistake, but it ended up fine. So I had booked preferred hotels. One of the ways of booking certain preferred hotels is with choice privileges points. And the process is quirky. So when you go through the process of booking a hotel stay, it doesn't show you what the cancellation rules are for that stay. And what I should have done was gone to the preferred hotel's website to pretend to book a paid stay to see what that hotel's cancellation rules were, because I knew there was a chance I'd be canceling this. Well, among the confirmation emails I got after booking it was one from the hotel that actually said they had a 24-hour cancellation rule. So I put on my calendar to wait till 24 hours ahead of time to cancel if I needed to. And then I went to cancel, and the preferred hotel's website said there's a 72-hour rule. And so what preferred hotels thought versus what the individual hotel thought were different, right? And at that point, I didn't have any choice. I had to go ahead and cancel, and I did. And luckily, the points did come back despite it saying that. But that's an example where like I could have done something to know that 72 hours was the right rule. I didn't think to do that, and I should have. But again, it turned out fine.
And I think it's just encouraging to know that not every redemption, not every trip is going to go perfectly. I had an episode all about positioning flights, and things can go wrong there. Where I live, I have to position literally everywhere. So just anything can happen if you don't give yourself enough time, or again, points, or I have points stuck in places because I followed a ghost phantom booking and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
it happens and it's frustrating, which is also, one I candidly admit. It's not like, oh, this happened. Oh, well, I mean, it can be frustrating, but I like what you said, right? The process of learning points and miles comes with some mistakes and those type of things. And that's how you learn and how you improve as well. So Greg, really appreciate all the feedback, the insight, the history today. I know we need to start wrapping this up. And I want to have you just for a moment, if you can, put on your Nostradamus hat. And I know you've seen a lot of changes over the last decade, and we don't really need to get into all the changes because there's been so many and it's an ever evolving world.
Sure.
But where do you foresee things changing or evolving in the future overall in this world, in this industry?
Let me first talk about a general trend I've seen over the years, which is back when I started in this hobby, most credit cards earned just 1 point per dollar for most things. And it was like a big deal if they earned 2 points per dollar for certain things. Today, you get kind of disgusted if you don't earn at least 3 points per dollar. So there are many cards that offer anywhere from 3 to 5 or even 6 points per dollar for some popular categories. So the ability to earn points through spend has increased drastically over the years. Also, the size of individual welcome bonuses for credit cards has grown drastically over the years. Again, when I started, most credit card offers were around 25,000 miles for signing up. There'd be like a big splashy deal when it was moved up to 50,000 miles. Today, that's laughable. I mean, you wouldn't get excited unless a card has 80,000, 100,000, 200,000 points associated with the welcome bonus. At the same time, they've made it harder. The banks have made it harder to sign up for a lot of different cards and keep getting the bonuses. It's still possible to do, but it's a lot harder. Back then, you could literally sign up for the same card like every week if you wanted to, and often, and keep getting the 25,000 miles over and over. I think the net result of all that is it's kind of easier today for people getting started to get a lot of points, because it used to be that you had to be pretty deep into this to learn which cards can you serially sign up for, because now you could just sign up for one, get 200,000 points or whatever. And if you're a big spender, maybe you have a lot of spend in certain categories, you could earn a ton of points from that spend. That's how things are today. So people who just want to start dipping their toes in, it's easier to get started and have enough points to do things with it. Conversely, I think there's more of a hurdle now towards getting to that next level. How do you keep increasing your spend? How do you keep increasing the number of cards you're signing up for and that sort of thing? It's still absolutely possible, but it does get harder. And so, this trend for credit card companies is for credit card companies to try to keep you as their customer and be your only, card. Chase wants their Sapphire Reserve card to be the one card in your wallet. And if you have to have another one, it better be another Chase card. That's what they want. And so they do more and more things to try to encourage it. And this is the part I don't love. And we are going to see more and more of this, is the coupons, the things that say, if you use this card, these restaurants or these hotels, you'll get some kind of rebate and so on. And so they keep increasing the annual fee. And so you feel really stuck. If I'm paying that annual fee, I've got to use my card at all those places in order to get those rebates. And so the theory, I think, by the card companies is that card will become stickier and you're going to keep using it all the time. And I don't know. I'm hoping that what's going to happen is that the credit card companies are going to realize that's not what people are doing, that people are going to start, shopping elsewhere. I'm already recommending to people, instead of the new Sapphire Reserve, it's a great card to get initially for the welcome offer and everything, but you really ought to be looking at cards like the Venture X, I think, for long-term, because it's got a much lower annual fee. And it pays for itself basically with a few just really easy to use credits. And there's none of those games of having to eat at certain restaurants, stay at certain hotels to get good value from it. All right. Well, I didn't answer your question. I went off on a tangent. So feel free to keep that part or not in your published podcast.
No, yeah, I thought that was fantastic, Greg. I think you gave us the insight on how things have changed. And I think for someone that just started this maybe a year or two ago, knowing that the exciting point sign up or welcome offer sign up bonus was 50K versus 25. That, the Freedom Unlimited offering 1.5x on everything was kind of a big deal because it was everything else was doing one. And then when the reserve came out originally and you can get 3x for dining, like, wow, that's pretty exciting. We got this new dining category.
Absolutely.
And then Amex had to step up their game because the Sapphire Reserve was so good back in 2016. Those are the nuances of where when you can kind of see the history, you can also understand how to navigate the changes that are upcoming. So I think that was still really helpful to be able to talk through and talk about. That being said, a couple last questions here before we wrap this one up, because this has been fantastic. Any quick advice for someone just getting started? I know that's a really loaded question in this world, but in the most simplistic form, if you just had a quick, you had already mentioned, look at the Capital One Venture X, but just general points and miles advice, what would you say?
Just do it, first of all. As I said earlier, you are going to make mistakes, but the only way to learn is to, sign up for a new card, get the welcome offer, make sure you pay your credit card bill in full so that you don't have to ever pay interest or late fees on your card, because that's how you're going to lose longer term. Much better you make mistakes with like, oh, I used my points for bad value, than I'm in a huge amount of debt because I didn't pay my credit card bill in full. Those are some basics that I think you should look at. And as far as like, one thing that people always ask is which points. So people have no idea what points they should get. And I think it's really important for people to understand that points aren't all made, the same, that Hilton and IHG points are worth way, way less than Hyatt points, than most airline miles, and that the best points are transferable points. So a number of banks, Chase, Amex, Capital One, Citibank, Wells Fargo, they all have points on their bank cards, not their co-brands. So not like if you're getting a Hyatt card or an American Airlines card, but if on their own bank cards, they have points that are transferable to a bunch of airline and hotel programs. And that's so important. And you don't need to understand why it's important right now. Like you don't need to understand why you can get better value from that later. What you need to understand is that when you're looking at different sign-up bonuses, you're seeing I could get 100,000 airline miles with a specific airline, or I get 100,000 transferable points. And if all else was equal, I would go for the 100,000 points every time. And why? Because what's going to happen as you get more into this stuff, DeAndre's going to mention some incredible deal that you need Air France Flying Blue miles to get in on that deal. And you're going to say, oh, I don't have any Air France Flying Blue miles. But you probably do, because you can transfer from your Chase points, your Amex points, all those ones I listed, to Flying Blue, and then get in on that great deal. So that's why when you're looking, go for transferable points.
I love that, Greg. I know we're long on time now. I want to do a couple rapid fire questions just because I'm curious at this point to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. And you already mentioned the favorite redemption ever, so I'm not obviously going to ask you that one, but a couple of questions. Best flight you ever taken, whether it's class, whether it's whatever, maybe best flight you ever taken.
Boy, I have a couple. Etihad First Apartments. I flew a daytime flight from Paris to Abu Dhabi. That's like having a whole little room to yourself with the bed and a captain's chair and all this stuff, and incredible service. And it's important that I pointed out daytime flight because you get all the time in the world to enjoy the great food, the caviar, the wine, champagne, all the things that come with the first class experience. I had time to take a shower on board. That was one of them. Another, again, daytime flight, Japan Airlines first class. It wasn't their latest, flashiest product, but their service and catering, like the food and drink and everything on Japan Airlines first class, is just out of this world. And it just makes for such an amazing experience to just be kind of waited on hand and foot and really get to enjoy it. Whereas like some great flights I've taken where they're overnight, it's great that you're able to sleep, but at the same time, you get limited time to enjoy all those kind of things.
Awesome. Favorite property in the U.S., resort, hotel, whatever it may be.
Alila Ventana Big Sur. That's a Hyatt property. It's all inclusive. Big Sur, if you've never been to Big Sur, California, it's stunning, stunningly beautiful. So it's worth going to that area, even if you're not staying at that hotel.
I know it's a very sought after property. Last question. Number one or top place that you would love to go back to, whether it's a property, a country, ideally, like destination that you would love to go back to because it was just so amazing for you.
There are so many places that I would love to go back to. And worse, there are so many places I haven't been to yet that are high on my list. Gosh, I have to say two. One that sticks out is Lake Como. I went to that area for the first time this past May, and just my wife and I just loved it. Another is New Zealand, the South Island, especially sort of the southwest area where Milford Sound is, Doubtful Sound. Apparently, they're actually fjords, even though they were misnamed as sounds. But that whole area is spectacular. And Queenstown, it's a little bit touristy, but it's spectacularly beautiful. All in that sort of southwest, South Island of New Zealand is amazing.
I love how you said that. I will be spending my honeymoon there. I think this episode might be coming out soon or while I'm on my honeymoon. So I can't wait to check it out as well.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me ask you, are your plans set? Because I have a recommendation that if you have any flexibility.
So I would love to hear your recommendations. We are flying after Fiji. So it's Hong Kong, Fiji, and then New Zealand. After when we get to New Zealand, so we're staying 2 days at the Park Hyatt in Auckland, flying down to Queenstown, staying at the Crown Plaza in Queenstown for like 4 days, then flying up to Christchurch, renting an RV, and driving for about 7 days in an RV back up to Auckland before we fly back home on flight to Dallas business class. So I'd love to hear your recommendation because whatever your recommendation is, I'm going to figure out how to fit it in.
All right. It's going to be tough because it requires an overnight. So Milford Sound is beautiful, but it's a 2-hour experience and it's very touristy. So there's millions of people there all going to do that. We also did we did an overnight in a place called Doubtful Sound, where you drive to like nowhere and they load you into a boat to take you across a lake. And then you get out of the boat and you get into a bus to drive over a mountain to Doubtful Sound. So that's how you get to Doubtful Sound. By the time you're there, you have 0 bars on your cell phone. Like literally nobody had a single bar. And you get loaded onto a overnight boat that has sleeping cabins. And you go out into all these different arms of the fjords there. And to say it's beautiful is such an understatement. It's ridiculous. But it was just a super fun experience because like we got to know like other people on the boat and to hang out, to like play games, to have meals together. And then you do like little excursions. You could go out on kayaks. There were dolphins hopping like along the boat. There were seals. Like it was just really, really special. And one of my favorite trip activities of my life was doing that Doubtful Sound experience.
We might have to pivot some of our dates because that sounds amazing. Was that one night that you did there or multiple nights?
Just one night. Yeah, one night.
Okay, we can figure it out. We'll figure out how to fit it in then. We'll figure it out. Greg, this has been a phenomenal conversation, phenomenal experience. And honestly, it's been my privilege and honor to be able to have you on our shows. I've been a listener of your show for quite a long time. You don't really need much of an introduction, but where can listeners follow and find you if they don't already by chance?
Well, you'll find Frequent Miler on the Air, the podcast, on any podcast platform or on YouTube. And the blog, frequentmiler.com, is readily available. So check us out there. Also, if you're into Facebook, we have a large Facebook group called Frequent Miler Insiders. And people get all kinds of great help from other community members there when planning trips. So that'd be the perfect place to say, hey, I'm going to New Zealand. What do you recommend? And people will jump in with all kinds of great suggestions.
I love that. There's 2 questions I'd like to end every show with. The first one, very simply, is, Greg, you've got a mountain of connections in this space. Who else should we have on the show, do you think?
I think you should have my other team members. I think you should have Nick. I think you should have Tim and Steven, who are writers. They're not part of the podcast. But what another person that'd be really fun, I think, for you to have on is our creative director, Carrie. So she is not a points and miles person, but she has traveled the world and is just so much fun to listen to her stories. She and her husband would go places with literally no plan of what they were going to do, where they're going to stay once they're there. They were doing it on like no money. And she's full of like fun stories about really what comes down to the kindness of strangers. But anyway, so that'd be my suggestion.
I'll throw out an email to the giant mailbag and see if we can get them on the calendar there. Greg, before we wrap this one up, last question is any final thoughts, any last gems or anything else before we end this one?
No, I'm gonna leave you at what we've already covered. I think we've covered a lot.
That we have. Greg, thank you again so much for being on this episode today. Again, it's been my privilege and an honor, and thank you so much for being here.
It was a pleasure.
And for the listeners out there, if you enjoyed this episode as well, as always, be sure to follow us on all social media channels and sign up for our weekly newsletter, our private Facebook group, as well as our WhatsApp community chat that we have, where we have a lot of engagement, a lot of conversation. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, do all the things, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.